Hello, this is our Rats with Team 4545 League, analyzing the game between QLQ, ZNZN, and Queen's Counselor. This was played in Team Event 53 in the 4th round, under 2200 section, and we have about a 300-point rating difference. Let's see what happens. Okay, this is a line I recommend on my website for White to play in lesson number 5, where I set up a whole terrific set of different openings that White can play if his first move is e4 to get Black out of his main lines and into something White's prepared. But it does give Black an equal game, but it's not the normal Petrov. That's the whole idea behind it. So all of Black's main lines are out the door. Okay, so I'm not sure where book ends, and I'm not going to try to figure it out, but it's safe to say that with the center pawns gone, that the game is even. But again, we're not in a normal Petrov, so White should be okay here. Black should be okay just as well. Okay. And there's really not much going on here, except both sides are getting developed, which is good. Here I notice that both sides have the Queen Rook and Queen Bishop at home. Funny how this turns out so much, but part of it's the fault of the openings. Most people will try to castle kingside early, so you can understand why those pieces do lag. It's when we start seeing them there at move 14 and 17 and 20 that we get concerned. Okay, so Black castles, and so does White. Hooray, the bishop's out. Okay. And same with White. Okay, so it's a very even game. And this is good. Get the rook on the open file, and I think that's just as good. And now White starts putting some questions to Black. Are you going to give up the bishop pair? Are you going to give me a pawn on h7? And Black has to decide what to do, and he elects to take the the knight on g5 and end all that. So for what it's worth, White has the bishop pair, but Black is still, since he's got his development going, he should be okay here. But one thing he doesn't want to do is trade directly down to a bishop versus knight ending. You know, if White can trade off the knights and swap those bishops, White's got a winning position, and the queens and the rooks, White's got a winning position. And I like to keep reminding, because not everyone watches every video, but if you look at my library, I believe it's game 158. I've got the game score of the famous game Stolze versus Kashtan, The Hague, 1928, and that was the Olympics, by the way. And Mr. Kashtan demonstrated how a bishop beats a knight in a symmetrical pawn structure. I think it was 3-on-3 on the king side and 2-on-2 on the queen side, or something like that. Very instructive game. Have a look. Okay. White declines the queen exchange, but you know, he might have gone for it. Okay, if queen takes, knight takes, like I say, the objective is now you want to trade these light squared bishops and a set of knights. And if you do that, you've reached a winning ending. So what might White try here? Well, how about knight b5? Okay, that puts a few questions to Black. He has guarded, he has to take care of something. If he plays c6, he loses. Okay? The idea behind c6 is that if the knight takes, the knight doesn't have a flight square, but Black just loses. So knight takes knight, rook takes knight, and bishop takes pawn, check, and game over. So let's go back. Queen takes, knight b5. What else can Black do besides trading knights? Well, he can't retreat his knight to e8 because the rook is going to fall to the same trick, right? Bishop takes. Ouch. Okay. So basically what that leaves is for Black to play knight takes knight. And now White has gotten rid of one set of knights. Now all he has to do is get rid of the bishops. And he's getting ready to get rid of a set of rooks. So White's a little bit closer to his aim here. It's Black to move, and he's got to avoid these exchanges. So what's Black do here? Knight d5 maybe? What's the idea behind that? To trade the knight for the bishop. So white needs to keep that bishop because he wants this bishop versus that knight in the ending. So how about if white goes over here and attacks a rook? Uh-oh, there's a problem, right? See it? Black's in trouble. So that move doesn't work for black. What's he going to do? It's hard to say what black's going to do here. There's going to be some more exchanges. He's not going to be able to avoid walking away from them. He could play c6. That covers e8. Now white will just go back there. Now if you try knight d5, okay, let's see. Bishop takes, now b6. Okay, then white plays c4, right? And suppose black tries rook a8. You take here, and take the bishop, and you're winning, and you have a winning game. So black still can't play knight takes d5, or knight to d5. He's got to play something like a6, right? Now, if white wants, he can play bishop c5 and tie black up a little bit. But what's wrong with just playing rook takes? And now rook d1. Now, black can try knight d5 here. Actually, he can't because white has c4, and there's a pin. So black is going to have to give up the open file or trade rooks. If he gives up the open file, white's just got a much better game. Where's he going to go? e8? Okay, that's fine. Now, let's just improve our position ever so slightly. Let's just keep your knight out of d5. Okay? And then white's objective here is to trade the bishops and trade the rooks. And white's that much closer to winning, and he's even closer if black does take the rook here. Okay? Black takes the rook, white takes back, and all white has to do is trade bishops, and he's got to win. And he can even play with the two bishops on the board and just play it like Stoltz versus Kashtan and use the two bishops to keep maneuvering. But I would suspect that that white is winning this position right here, and he's just going to have to apply Grandmaster technique. But I believe white is winning. So anyway, let's back it up. So trading queens was fine. White's trying for a knockout right now with a one mover. Well, black can guard that, and he does. And then here's another move I'm going to question, and let's explain it. Okay, I've seen it. Probably you've seen it many times mentioned. Which rook or wrong rook? And the question is, when two rooks can move to one square, and you move one of those rooks to that square, did you move the right rook or the wrong rook? And I'm going to call it the wrong rook for the simple reason that the rook on f1 needs to get developed. And that's the only reason. Now, maybe white doesn't want some exchanges, but I've already explained white does want exchanges. He wants to trade rooks and queens, and I've already given the reason. So rook fe1, I believe, is the better move, simply because it gets that last rook developed. And you wouldn't think it'd be significant, and I can't prove why. I'm just saying I think that's the wrong rook. Okay, so let's go on. Okay. And now, look, black's rooks are a little better than white's rooks. So black is actually going to start getting the better of this here in a moment. And I think that's premature. White should be aiming for major piece exchanges and keep the pawn structure intact. And when white can do that, he's going to win the minor piece ending. Okay, so now this kind of helps white a little bit because, he wanted to trade light squared bishops. Now all he has to do is trade a knight, trade the rooks and queens, and he wins. So, but it's not that easy now because black's just a little better placed now. Look at black's rooks compared to white rooks. Black's rooks are both on an open file, and one of white's rooks is just defending a pawn. You know, he pushed f4. That usually you push something like that to start a kingside attack. But here it's just a loose pawn that's tied down, causing a rook to be tied down to its defense. And since black was threatening to trade rooks and take on f4, black had a threat, not white. White felt obligated to trade off a set of rooks. Now white's traded his one active rook for one of black's active rooks. So even though black's no longer on two files, he's on an open file, and white isn't. So now queen d5 attacks a knight, and I believe here black missed a very, very good move. And it gets tricky. I was working on this a little bit. Okay, knight takes b2. It doesn't look like he can get away with that, but he can. Okay, now this is the logical move, queen b3, and it's natural for someone to analyze that move and say, well, queen b3 and my knight's trapped. What do I do? And unfortunately, this is one of these things we call a thinking deficiency, where one side stops his analysis and looks no further. And black actually has resources here, and I think it starts with b6 of all moves. And here's just a just suppose. I mean, there's other lines, but let's just suppose white comes back to f2. Okay, now black has a very tricky move, and the move is knight d4. And if white takes the knight on b2, black has a tactic: knight e2 check, and white can't take the knight because his queen falls, so king must go to h8. And then black comes down here and grabs the knight back, and is attacking the queen, and suddenly black is the one that's a pawn ahead and with all the winning chances. Now white's fighting for a draw. So what else can white do on knight d4 aside from taking the knight? He can take this, but the problem here you run into is that there's a check, and the king goes to h1. And black has some good moves at his disposal here. One is queen f2, I think. Queen f2 is one of these little shockers that you don't expect, and white's a little bit of hot water here, to say the least. What's white going to do? He can't take the queen; he gets mated. So he needs to put the rook somewhere. Where? Well, if he slides it to the left, rook e1 check is embarrassing, and if he comes over here, oops, rook e1 is still embarrassing. So black could have taken that pawn and gotten away with it, but he didn't look at it enough. Let's see how much time he spent. Well, he spent 10 minutes, and what he played was okay. It still leaves black with a better position, but I think knight takes b2 was even better. And now the advantage that white had of bishop versus knight has vanished. So, but black's just a little better posted here. Again, his rook is active and white's rook is passive. And white's queen is a little more centralized, but black's isn't doing poorly where it's at. So slight advantage black here. And then he comes back just to watch the back rank. And it's kind of unfortunate that the king has to run over to the corner like that. He's just trying to preserve the position with the queens on, but black says, I'm going to trade queens anyway. And now the threat of queen f2 looms again. If white comes back to b3, there's that move again. We've seen it before. Okay, so I think white saw it and says, oh shoot, I got to trade queens. But if you trade them, let's improve the position of my queen. But maybe white should have just traded and let this knight get active. I don't know. It's hard to say. You can play knight e2, and rook e1 fails to knight g3 check. But here black's got the active rook, but watch what happens. Okay, black starts centralizing his king, and now black plays here, and white can't really chase that rook anymore, and black's going to get a really strong position with his king. So in a way, white can't trade knights. He's kind of in a little hot water there. So he's, I guess, really black's much better here, and it's because he has the active rook and white doesn't. And that's goes back to what I said earlier, wrong rook. Okay, wrong rook went to e1. This wouldn't have happened had he played the other rook. But now black gets on the 7th rank, and I suppose if a grandmaster was playing this, he would win this. White comes up with some good resources, and let's watch what happens. He really has to try something. If he plays rook c1, it's similar to the other position I showed, except the knights are on, and black's knight just starts crawling into the white position, and even though white can grab pawns, so can blacks, and that rook on the 7th is just huge nuisance value. So, and then white undergoes a risky strategy. He says, go ahead and have all my pawns on the queen side. And black says, thank you, I will. And there goes another one. And then there goes the last one. So I would even suspect in this position white is lost, simply because black is 2 pawns ahead and has 3 connected passed pawns. Black just needs to consolidate on the king side if need be and get those pawns running. Well, run one pawn. You can't run them all, and maybe you can't keep them all, but then white can only run one pawn himself, and he starts it going first, and I would even suspect knight g6 here, just sacrifice the pawn, should be enough, or could be enough, maybe not. Let's see, knight g6, knight takes, pawn takes, rook takes, king f7, and black has 3 pawns, white has 2. Good chance this is a win for black, but black certainly isn't losing. And again, a grandmaster could sit down and demonstrate why this is winning, but for our purposes, we just leave this to player analysis. But black tries to run a pawn too, but that gives white time to run his pawn. Now black says, no, you're not running that pawn any further. But this gives white time to start making threats of his own against those pawns. So now he gives one back. Now white's only one pawn down, but the position is still risky. But all black's pawns are no longer connected, and black gets his king active in the middle of the white pawns that are trying to advance. And it looks like black may have solved his problems for the most part. Maybe white should play rook c6 here and try to run the pawn and tie something down. Let's see. No, I don't think that was the right move. What about just simply rook c6? What does white do? Check. And the king comes back here. You know, this pawn is going to tie something down here. You always want your rooks behind the pawns. Okay, so rook a3. It's not going to lose for white, but it's going to cut his winning chances down, because you need your rooks behind the pawn. Now, white is ideally posted. His rook is behind the pawn. Instead of having black's rook there, black could have done... Well, you know what? Maybe black couldn't have done that. There might have been a knight fork on e6. Let me back up. I can't see everything. I don't try to see everything. Well, no, it's not a knight fork because the rook's not on c5. Okay, anyway, f6. Now, here's where I'm suggesting rook c6, and it looks like it's okay. Anyway... Now, that's clever. Got a little mate threat. Stops that, and shoves the pawn. So, black's made some progress, but unfortunately he doesn't have a win. And white just defends carefully, and looks like he's done it. And now the major threat is gone. And here the players agreed to a draw, and that's pretty much what it is. So both sides had winning chances, and I don't know if they realized those winning chances at the time, but maybe they do now. I hope so, and I look forward to any comments and suggestions and improvements. I thank you for the time to look at it, and I'll be making another video for you real soon. Take care.